Hello everyone, hope you are all doing well and staying safe. So in this video, we'll be analyzing 2013 General Studies Paper 1 UPSC Mains question paper. We are not going to solve the paper as it is. We'll be doing that in the later videos. But in this video, we'll be analyzing the questions and the keywords that were asked in 2013 GS paper 1. In this video, questions from 1 to 15 will be analyzed and the rest of the questions will be in another part of the video, that is part 2. Now without further delay, let us begin with the first question. So what is the first thing that you see whenever you open the question paper? In terms of answering it, you will see the rules required or the conditions required to answer those questions. In this case, answer questions is not more than the word limit specified for each in the parenthesis, meaning each question will carry the word limit for that answer that you have to adhere to. Content of the answer is more important than its length. But remember, it's a catch 2022 situation because you don't have more area or space to answer a question in your own accord. You'll be having limited space. So it is best to curtail yourself, meaning limit yourself to the specified word limit. That is how you practice mains. So the first question is, though not very useful from the point of view of a connected political history of South India, the Sangam literature portrays the social and economic conditions of its time with remarkable vividness. Comment 200 words. So what are the two keywords given here? One is the Sangam literature. The second is social and economic conditions. So these are the two key points that you have to highlight. You have to write, meaning you have to elaborate, in the sense you have to explain those key points, and then you have to support your answers in regards to those two keywords. Sangam literature is Tamil literature, right? From that point of view, explain what Sangam literature is, how important it has been in portraying the socio and economic conditions of that time, and that is how you approach this question. Now moving on to question number 2. Now question 2, you have two parts, A and B, each carries 5 marks and the word limit for each of those questions is 100 words. So what is A? Discuss the Tandav dance as recorded in early Indian inscriptions. The second is Chola architecture represents a high watermark in the evolution of temple architecture. Discuss. So we will be tackling the A part in the first explanation or analysis. Discuss the Tandav dance. So the keyword here is Tandav. What is Tandav? Tandav is the divine dance of Lord Shiva. You explain what Tandav dance is, why it is traditionally important, right? You quote or you explain the importance of the Nataraja, which is the violent depiction or violent form of Lord Shiva himself when he is performing the Tandav dance. That is how you approach this question. Now moving on to part B, which talks about Chola architecture, right? Cholas, you have 850 to 125 CE. And they have this refinement of the Dravidian architecture, right? They have this adoption or some sort of an representation or assimilation from the Dravidian art and architecture. That is how you try to explain the influence or the confluence of Dravidian architecture into the Chola architecture, where they are kind of refining the Dravidian art and architecture itself. You quote those points and then you try to explain certain architectures, right? Certain temples where this temple architecture, particularly during the Chola period, developed, and that is how you approach this answer. And remember, this question has a word limit of 100 words. Now moving on to the next question, right? Question number 3. Now coming to question number 3, defying the barrier of age, gender and religion, the Indian woman became the torchbearer during the struggle for freedom in India. Discuss. This has a marks of 10 allocated to it and the word limit is 200. So what are the important points that you have to touch upon when answering this question. First, the Indian woman, right? The role of Indian women in Indian freedom struggle. You have to highlight their contribution for in India getting its independence. Not only that, you have to touch upon what are the role that they have played irrespective of age, gender and religion barriers during our freedom struggle. Particularly, you have to discuss what was the situation at that point of time for women in particular in society itself. Now, not only that, you have to give certain examples of women leaders who took the reins of leadership during the freedom struggle, both young or whatever it is. You have to pick few examples, at least 3 examples from different formats, meaning in the sense you have some foreign women who joined the Indian freedom struggle movement, you have some young leaders, you have some old leaders, right? You have to give certain examples from different age areas so that they so that you can portray a balanced answer as to what was their role despite so many hindrances and their contributions to freedom struggle in India. That is how you should approach this answer. Now moving on to question number 4. Several foreigners made India their homeland and participated in various movements. Analyze their role in the Indian struggle for freedom. Again, 200 word limit, 10 marks. So again, foreigners in Indian freedom struggle. In the earlier question also I was touching upon this fact where you have to point out not only women leaders, there were certain foreign women figures, leaders in the sense who were contributing their time, their resources in helping India gain its freedom. Right, particularly we talk about the national movement. We have to talk about some foreigners in Indian freedom struggle. Not only that, we have to talk about their contribution also. Right, you have Annie Besant, you have Charles Ferret Andrews, you had Sister Nivedita. These are the few people, right? You have many more, but these were the few focal points of foreigners helping India in its freedom struggle. You talk about them, you try to portray what were you first list out the foreigners that were helping India during its struggle for freedom, then you go on with each and every individual and try to explain in a short way, in a precise way as to what was their role and what was their contributions and how significant there were there, or how significant was their how significant were their contributions to Indian struggle was. From that point of view, you have to approach this question. Again, 200 word limit, 10 marks. Now moving on to question number 5. Coming to question number 5, this is my suggestion. Whenever you are reading a question, please read it at least twice, because sometimes I myself make the mistake of not reading the question properly. That is why whenever you are reading the question, allocate a respectable amount of time, not 10-20 minutes, but just respectable enough so that you don't misread the words or misunderstand the words. So in this case, 5th question, right? In many ways, Lord Dalhousie was the founder of, or Dalhousie, forgive for the pronunciation, Indian after all. Lord Dalhousie was the founder of modern India, and they are asking you to elaborate on that word itself. So you try to give an explanation or an introduction as to who Lord Dalhousie was in a short and precise manner. What were his approaches, what were his rules, what were his policies, what were his politics when he approached India, in the sense that he is being attributed with the fact that he was the founder of modern India. Now, when you talk about modern India, you have to define in a line or two what modern India represents, and then you have to go on to explain what were the contributions of Lord Dalhousie in modern India. Whether actually it is factually it is true or not, whether he is being just attributed because he was a British ruler at that point of time. Now again, you have to take up a balanced answer, and you have to support your answer whether you are agreeing with the matter of the fact or not. Again, this is a 200 word limit question, and the marks allocated to it are 10 marks. So this is how you kind of approach this question in this regard. Now moving on to question number 6. Now let us read this question a bit carefully. Critically discuss the objectives of Bhudan and Gramdan movements initiated by Acharya Vinoba Bhave and their success. 10 marks, 200 word limit. So there are 3 keywords in this question. One, you have the Bhudan movement. Second, you have Gramdan movement. You have Acharya Vinoba Bhave. And the most important is their success is being asked. So you are being asked to assess whether those movements have been successful in achieving their targets or not. Now you have to explain what are these movements, why they were started by Acharya Vinoba Bhave, what were his contributions to the movement, and how successful, and at the end of it the conclusion should be written in a way the overall impact of those 2 movements on Indian society as a whole. That is how you approach this question. Now moving on to question number 7. Now again, reading this question carefully, write a critical note on evolution and significance of slogan Jai Jawan and Jai Kisan. Again, the limit is 200 words. The marks allocated are 10. So what are the keywords in this question? You are being asked to critically evaluate the significance of the slogan Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan. Now what are the important points that you have to keep in mind for this answer? The keywords are Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan. What is the third part, right? You have to answer who came up with this slogan. If I am not wrong, it was Indian Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri in the year 1965. So when he came up with this slogan, what does it mean? It means hail the soldier, right? You have to support the soldier or support the farmer. That is kind of the thing. Hail I don't use because Now coming back to the question itself, you talk about how significant his leadership has been. What was the context behind his raising the slogan, right? Because it talks about green revolution at a point of time. It talks about the soldiers because they were supporting or they were defending India continuously, and not only that, it also signifies the role of Indian farmers or farmers in Indian society. So you have to also point out to the fact, remember this was given by Lal Bahadur Shastri in the year 1965. Later on in 1998, after the Pokhran nuclear test that India conducted, Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji also added a tagline to this, or added a third connotation to it called Jai Vignan. So it became Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, Jai Vignan. But remember, the most significant slogan is Jai Jawan and Jai Kisan. Without the soldier and without the farmer, the Indian construct or the idea of India might be a hard thing to sustain. Is the reasoning that you have to kind of elaborate with this slogan. So that is this question. Again, 200 word limit, so you have to be very precise in explaining what you want to say in these 2 regards. Now moving on to question 8. So this is a kind of a depth based question because they are asking you to discuss the contributions of Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad to both pre and post independent India. This is a very nuanced and a depth based, a lot of background information, a lot of history is to be known, because it not only talks about both post independent India or pre independent India, it is asking specifically where you have to discuss, the keyword here is discuss, the contributions of Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad. So you have to note here, the important points to note here is Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad. His little bit of his introduction. You have to talk about independent India, how his contributions have been to the education. Right, at a point of time, he was the education minister post independent India. He played a significant role in Indian educational system because he was kind of the roots of modern Indian education system were laid during his period. So you have to point out those contributions post independent India. Pre-independent India, he was the person who endorsed the Nehru report, right? You have to kind of understand in 1928 when Nehru came up with his report, he endorsed the Nehru report despite that report being severely criticized by many Muslim personalities during that era. Again, remember, it is a depth based answer. You have to be very picky in picking the points, in the sense you have to understand what were the contributions of Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad both in pre-independent era and post-independent era. That is why you have to be very careful in answering this question, because there is a greater chance that you will completely miss this question by a mile. Again, 200 word limit, 10 marks. Now moving on to the next question. Analyze the circumstances that led to Tashkent Agreement in 1966. Discuss the highlights of the agreement. Now, three key areas where you have to answer this question. What? First, give an intro as to Tashkent Agreement in 1996. 2. What were the circumstances that led to the Tashkent Agreement? 3. What were the provisions in the agreement itself? 4. The fallout of that agreement in India itself, because when the agreement was signed, there was an adverse kind of a reaction in back home. So you have to kind of understand what were those reactions also. That is how you approach this answer. Again, you are not going to go into deep in those four areas. You are just expanding or expounding on key elements. They are asking you to analyze, okay, not explain. So it has to be in a critical tone. Now moving on to question number 10. Critically examine the compulsions which prompted India to play a decisive role in emergence of Bangladesh. Now first, Bangladesh, right? It's kind of very a polarizing moment in the two nation theory construct, which kind of broke after the break of Bangladesh or emergence of Bangladesh. Now you have to talk about the atrocities that the Pakistanis were carrying out in Bangladesh, which was East Pakistan at that point of time. Now you have to talk about the role of Pakistan army in carrying out these atrocities. There was a genocide on not only the that were particularly aimed at the minority Hindu population. Now after expounding on those or explaining those circumstances, those scenarios, you have to talk about these were the two reasons that led the Indian government to carry out a full scale kind of an action, direct action, not direct action is something entirely different, but nonetheless that forced the hand of the Indian government to decide to end this genocide, and that led to the emergence of Bangladesh, which was East Pakistan. So that is how you kind of explain. You have to explain the role people played during it, who were the people, and you have to explain their actions in a sense. And you have to, in the initial part of the answer, you have to give absolutely solid reasons as to what were the atrocities that were being carried out that forced the Indian government, Indira Gandhi government, she was the Prime Minister at that point of time, that forced the Prime Minister Indira Gandhi at that point of time to take an effective action against these atrocities that were being conducted against minorities, Hindus in East Pakistan at that point of time. Not only that, remember, close to 15 to 10 million people kind of had to flee their living, they have to leave behind everything that they owed just to save their own lives. So again, 200 words, 10 marks, you have to be very specific, but at least at the first instance, in the first beginning of your answer, majority of it has to be solid reasons that was taking place, that were kind of events that were taking place in East Pakistan at that point of time. In the later part of the answer, you have to link up with the first part by saying that the above actions were the reason that forced Prime Minister Indira Gandhi to take an effective action to end the genocide that was taking place in East Pakistan. Right, this is a very important question in terms of our own history. Now moving on to the next question, that is question number 11. So let us read this question in a bit of slowly. What? Because I think you should read this question slowly. Latecomer industrial revolution in Japan involved certain factors that were marked differently from what West was experiencing or experienced. Analyze. So this was the thing that I was talking about. In the zeal to read the question in a quick or a fast manner, I misread the word experienced as experience. Again, this is significant, right? Every word carries a bit of meaning, a lot of meaning in UPSC Mains. So to clarify, let us read this question in a proper way. Latecomer industrial revolution in Japan involved certain factors that were markedly different from what West had experienced. Analyze, 200 words, 10 marks. First key area that you have to address, industrialization of Japan. What were the reforms that they were bringing in? By that point of time, how advanced was West? You have to give a comparison as to, because the word latecomer is being asked in the first instance itself, so you have to give a comparison as to, by the time Japan started the era of industrialization, how industrialized was the Western Hemisphere. So from that point of view, you have to give a little bit of comparison. And finally, what was the effect of this industrialization in Japan had on its economy, its overall society? Those are the points that you have to engage with this question. Now moving on to the next question, that is question number 12. Africa was chopped into states artificially created by accidents of European Union. You see again the mistake. Accidents of European competition. Analyze, 200 words. First, you have to explain Africa or the genesis of the African construct. Second, you have to talk about the colonization of Africa as a whole by Europeans. You have to go through a short history of the colonization of the African continent. Now you talk about, after the explanation of this competition, colonization, then you have to go on and explain who were the parties that were competing with each other, the European countries that were competing with each other to gain a foothold or to gain a stronghold or to control large swaths of Africa. You talk about Britain, you talk about France, you talk about Germany, you talk about Italy, you talk about Spain, and don't forget the Portugal there, because again Portugal, wherever these countries are, Portugal is bound to be there, if not the first to be there. Now you have to explain all these things in this regard. That is how the question, remember the key word that they are asking you to is analyze. So you start with the African continent, you go on to explain the colonization of African continent. The third point is you have to explain who were the people that were colonizing Africa in the first place, who were the European countries, right? I told you Britain, France, Germany, Portugal. Then you have to explain what they were trying to do to gain control of African territory, and you then explain, because of this unhealthy zeal to control large swaths of African mineral rich Africa, you talk about the states, artificial states that they themselves created to protect their territory. This was not an African thing. This was an European thing that they created to protect their territory. Like, so you have to explain in that regard. Now moving on to next question, right? Question number 13. So this is a little bit of an important question. This talks about American Revolution and there is a relation to its economy. In the sense, the question is, American Revolution was an economic revolt against mercantilism. Substantiate. So when the word substantiate is being asked, you have to give proper explanation as to what the question is. You have to give a kind of an explanation by giving examples and then support your answer. So when you look at this question, American Revolution was an economic revolt against mercantilism. Substantiate. First, two keywords, right? To understand, you have to understand what mercantilism is. So in order to understand mercantilism, you have to understand the economy of Britain, because it talks about mercantilism is kind of the economic policy of Britain. So what kind of an impact mercantilism had on Americans is the second part that you have to elaborate on. Then you have to explain why Americans were not happy with the concept of, or the idea or the policy of mercantilism, and how were they impacted economically, right? Meaning, because of this mercantile policy or mercantilism, how were Americans affected by this policy on the economic front? And then you say these were the factors that led to the revolt of the Americans on economic basis against mercantilism. So this is very important. You have to understand what mercantilism is. You have to relate, or you have to give out a suitable example as to what was the impact of the mercantilism on American from the economic perspective. Then you go on to explain how dissatisfied, how unhappy they were, and then you conclude the answer with explaining these were the reasons that led for these people to revolt against mercantilism. So this is a very important question. Remember, world history. Now moving on to question number 14. So coming to question number 14, what policy instruments were adopted to contain the Great Economic Depression? So this talks about the Great American Economic Depression that happened in the year 1929, when the stock market crashed in 1929 in America, and that led to a huge response from two presidents of the America. Right, first was during Herbert Hoover. During his presidency, the market crash took place, and the recovery kind of took place in Franklin D. Roosevelt era. So you have to explain what their policies were. Particularly, there is this interesting concept called 3 R's, right? They kind of created this new response that Roosevelt came up with to end the Great Depression that was taking place in the American society. First was relief, the second was recovery, the third was reform. Again, you talk about all of this and then you conclude your answer. Now coming to question number 15, discuss the various social problems which originated out of speedy process of urbanization in India. Now this is coming back to home again, because the last two questions were kind of related to America. Now we are coming to India. Now you talk about first urbanization, you talk about the social problems that are being experienced by people due to this rapid urbanization, and you have to also explain why this phase or this pace of urbanization is taking place. First, you talk about urbanization. Second, you talk about the problems of this rapid urbanization or the speedy process of urbanization that is taking place in India. Not only that, you have to expound on, because they are saying the word discuss here, so you have to discuss, you have to talk about the reasons as to why this urbanization process is taking place in India. 200 word limit, 10 marks. So these are the 1 to 15 questions in the part 1. In the next part, we will be dealing with the rest of the questions from General Studies Paper 1 2013 UPSC Mains paper. If you have liked the video, please like the video. Please do share this video. I know many of you are going to write the mains exam. Having an understanding of how questions were asked in the last previous years in UPSC Mains is certainly an advantage. I hope you share it with fellow friends and family. If you have not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the channel and please turn on the notifications. Once again, thanks for watching. Hope you have learned something from this video. Thank you.